Hey everybody, chapter 11, lesson 3. And what we're looking at here as we kind of tackle this last lesson in chapter 11, and we've been looking at these dictators and how kind of this war begins, we want to take a look at how the Holocaust begins as well, because it plays such a crucial role to the war in Germany and the war in Europe. And, we go back to our essential question that we had here at the start of chapter 11, which is why do some people not respond to injustice while others try to prevent it, right? So why didn't someone try to stop this Holocaust, and why did some people try to stop the Holocaust? So what we're looking at here, there'll be three things we'll talk about in our lesson this morning. We'll take a look at why it was that so many Jews stayed in Germany before the Holocaust began. Why would you stay in a country that doesn't like you? We'll take a look at what happened when some Jews did resist, when they stood up to injustice. And we'll also take a look at the reality of the Holocaust and how is it that we assign guilt or responsibility for the Holocaust. So that's the plan. And we want to start here with anti-Semitism in general, the Nazi persecution of the Jews, right? And because we can ask ourselves that question of why do they stay? Because when it comes to the Nazis, I mean, the bottom line is their hatred of the Jew was well above the norm. I mean, they really hated Jews. It was far beyond common anti-Semitism. And remember what we had said, I showed this map to you the other day, and what you're looking at here, right, is any place with a triangle was a city where there had been a good-sized Jewish population, and then any place with a circle is a city or town where the people of that town had kicked out anyone who was Jewish. They had committed a pogrom, a kind of a miniature version of a Holocaust where they kick them out and beat them and take all of their materials and belongings. And so that is common in Europe at the time. But I don't want you to think that the Nazis are just kind of expressing the same thing that everyone else is. There's this particularly violent hatred of people who are Jewish. But millions of other people are also killed in the Holocaust, too. I need you to understand that. I mean, 6 million Jews are killed, but millions of others are also killed that include those who are disabled, physically disabled, mentally handicapped, gypsies, a number of people who are Eastern European, Christians who opposed Hitler, and many others are killed as well in the Holocaust. So it's really an attempt by the Nazis to purge their enemies and remove them from the equation. So let's get back at this question about why so many Jews end up staying in Germany. And the answer there is that they're German, right? Hitler takes power in 1932. But the reality is that anti-Semitism had been around for hundreds of years, so it's not like it's a new thing for many German Jews that people would be anti-Semitic. And even when the Nazis pass the Nuremberg laws in 1935, and they take citizenship away from people who are Jewish Germans, they ban marriage between Germans and Jews. They forbid Jews from holding public office or voting, or you have to even have a name that sounds Jewish so it's easily identifiable and your passport gets stamped, and you're all familiar with the yellow star. But all of these things, it doesn't necessarily make you any less German, right? You still speak German. You believe German things. You have German background, German culture. Remember, Judaism is your religion, right? But German is your country. So it's kind of like if you woke up one day and someone said to you, well, you're not American anymore. You can't be an American citizen. Well, that doesn't make you something else. You're still American in your culture and your ideas. You're still who you are. You're still American. So even though from 1938 on, when you have Jews banned from all kinds of jobs and half of them are out of work because they're not allowed to hold jobs, people will still stay because they're German. And things have been bad before, but they've always gotten better over time. There's no reason for German Jews to not believe that. I don't want you to get the wrong impression, though. There were many many Jews who resisted, both during World War II, as resistance fighters, and there were rebellions inside the ghettos that the Nazis had established in cities that they controlled to keep Jews prisoner. But the response to resistance was absolutely brutal. For example, this guy right here. His name is Herschel Grinspan. It's this guy's name right here. I'll circle it for you so you can see it. This guy right here, Herschel Grinspan, that's him. Ding. And he was a Polish Jew. And he sought out a Nazi official in Paris. And this is after his family was forced off their land and they had been, they lost their jobs in Germany. You can see it's 1938 right down here, November 14th, 1938. And in revenge for his family suffering at the hand of Nazis, he sought out a German diplomat in Paris, went into his office in the German embassy in Paris, and shot the guy, killed him. And this act of revenge is almost like Hitler was waiting for it, because it's like, oh, all I need is an excuse. And so when Hitler finds out about it, he orders his propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, to begin attacking the Jews. And this takes on, and it's supposed to appear like a spontaneous uprising, like all the Germans of Germany are just rising up together and lashing out at the Jews because they're so terrible. But the reality is this night of anti-Jewish violence is completely organized by the Nazi Party, by the government. And it's called Kristallnacht, this night of violence, because of the broken glass that's all over the sidewalk. And you can see the stats here. I'm not going to read all these stats to you, but what you should note is just how brutal that response was. You know, these brutal responses often discouraged people from doing anything else, from resisting. And in some others, it still encourages them to resist. But it shows what happens, that the response is particularly brutal if you do, in fact, lash out in revenge. But I will say this, Kristallnacht is the last straw for many German Jews, and hundreds of thousands will try to flee, and you can see that on this map, where tens of thousands of German Jews will try and go to different countries around the world over the 7 years leading up to World War II. But Kristallnacht becoming kind of the real last straw, where hundreds of thousands of that total attempted to get out in just those last year or two before World War II began. Most of them who apply to get to the United States never end up getting here. 250,000 total. That number is an estimate, of course, right? We're not sure exactly what the total number is that do get out, but we have estimates. They are able to escape Germany. Some of them are recaptured, like the Frank family, Anne Frank, and her family escaped Germany into Belgium, of course, and then they were captured in Belgium. Some of them that got out fled illegally, and they were caught and returned to Europe. Remember that America has quotas on immigration, so if you get here illegally, because we have quotas, we sent you back, and we definitely did that. We also prevented anyone who was poor from arriving. And the Nazi laws at the time made it hard to travel here with more than $100. And there was no laws for refugees. There was no exception for refugees or people that were persecuted by other countries. So what we have here then is a group of people that America does not necessarily welcome, and neither do other nations around the world. Other nations around the world close their doors to the Jews. This is why when we talk about refugees, whether it's from places like Syria or Sudan or other places around the world, people say, don't let it be like the Holocaust. And it's not just about the killing, it's about the fact that we denied refugees access, that so many of the people we sent back ended up dead. So how do we get from these brutal laws to the concentration camps and the death camps? How does that happen? What do we do? How does that work? And it's called The Final Solution. And now concentration camps were not new to the Nazis, okay? I don't want you to think that they were. They weren't new to the Nazis. Typically, that's where they would put their political opponents. And the first one was built in 1933, just a year after the Nazis took power. And so you would go to these camps if you were a political enemy, and you would work until you were dead. One of the first and largest, for example, was a camp named Buchenwald, and hundreds of thousands of people, 200,000 Jews, for example, would work there. You'd work there for 12-hour shifts, and you'd work until you died. That's what it was. That was the concentration camp. But what happens is in 1942, the winter of 1942, at the Wannsee Conference, which is a place outside Berlin in Germany, a bunch of Nazi leaders get together at the Wannsee Conference, and they come up with what they call the final solution of the Jewish question. And what they do with this is very deliberate at this conference. They discuss the most efficient way to kill Jews. They talk about executing them by gunshot, for example, because but that's not easy to do, right? I mean, first of all, it's soldiers that could be on the front lines. It's bullets that could be used to kill the enemy, and really executing women and children, even if you don't think that they're human, even if you think they're just an inhuman Jewish person, that gets to the brain after a while. It's not good to be an executioner, for your life. They try suffocating them with exhaust. They talk about that, but the problem is that you just can't kill enough of them fast enough. So what they decided to do is they said, well, we have all these existing concentration camps, right? Let's add a second camp to those. Let's add an extermination camp, a death camp, to those concentration camps. And in the death camp, we will gas the prisoners to death. Most of these camps, the concentration camps, were in Poland, famous ones like Treblinka and Auschwitz-Birkenau that you've heard. So really, like, for example, Auschwitz, there was actually two camps. There was Auschwitz-Birkenau. So one of them was the concentration camp. The other one was the death camp, extermination camp. So, for example, at Auschwitz, the general policy, there were always exceptions, but the general policy was the men would work until they died in the factories at the concentration camp, whereas the elderly, the sick, the kids, women, in general, mothers, that those were immediately sent to the gas chambers as soon as they got off of the trains. So using these chambers, you could kill 2,000 at a time and up to 12,000 a day, so that you could really up the level of killing. This is economies of scale. It's the factory killing is what this is. If you're kind of wondering what that looks like, that would be this, right? So you would get off, here you come in on the train, and what you have here are you arrive off the train, and those who are immediately sentenced to death will head off to the gas chambers, depending on what you've got going on. Like this, and then those who are going to be kept alive, you'll end up either in these barracks, or you'll end up in these barracks here. Those women that were kept alive for whatever reason would live here, and then those who were obviously sentenced to death right away would be brought right to death. So that's an example of what that would look like. You can see what that looked like in the real world. This is the overhead view of this bottom portion of the map, right? And you can see them side to side, how they obviously match up. So why would Germans let this happen, right? And is it because Hitler talked about Germany's defeat being from the Jews? Was it the fact that there was just anti-Semitism in Germany? Is it the fear of the Gestapos? Is it economic distress? And really, it's kind of all of these. The answer is it's different for everybody. And that's what's really tricky about this. Are you guilty of this? Are you just responsible for it? How do we figure that out? And we'll do some work with that in class to try and kind of puzzle that out and who's responsible and who's guilty. So that's a good place to stop for now.